Welcome to the session. Today we're delving into a fascinating angle of language learning. How you can understand English perfectly, but then, find it incredibly hard to express yourself in it.
Yeah, that's always been a puzzler. How is it that we pick up movies and podcasts, but speaking just feels like a mountain to climb?
Exactly, it's like our brains are on one track and our mouths on another, right? The concept here is that comprehension comes easy because we've absorbed English slowly and clearly, but speaking requires a rapid, reflexive response our brains haven't fully automated.
Right, and when you're practicing by listening to slow, clear speech, it sets you up for shadowing, which is basically imitating the narrator to build that speaking reflex.
Yeah, it's sort of like having a soft training session. You're not racing, but rather gently developing the muscle memory needed to speak.
Yeah,
You know, it's about learning to speak confidently, one step at a time.
that's a good point. I mean, we all know that translating in your head, trying to convert every word, slows you down, but some learners insist it's just a natural part of learning, right?
Right. But here's the twist. This approach highlights that while understanding is built up over time through consistent exposure, speaking is more about rewiring a spontaneous reflex. And that's why so many learners feel stuck.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the podcast's suggestion that practicing shadowing is not just mimicking sound, but training your brain to react without a pause. I'm curious though, do you think it's enough on its own?
I think it's a crucial part, but not the only piece. It's like practicing scales on a piano. You build technique, but you need to feel the
Yeah.
emotion too, right? So while shadowing builds your speech reflex, incorporating real conversation practice rounds it out.
That's a good analogy. It's a bit like saying you have the ingredients for a great meal, but you still need to cook them just right. The podcast, in this case, gives gentle encouragement to break through that silence barrier.
Exactly. It's about easing into the process with slow, clear English. The idea is that if you listen carefully and then try to reproduce those sounds and rhythms, you'll eventually speak more naturally. It's really a practice of retraining your speech muscles.
I like that idea, a sort of language gymnasium for your mouth and brain. But sometimes I wonder, isn't it also about confidence? I mean, even if you know it, if you're nervous, you'll still hesitate.
Absolutely. Confidence plays a huge role. The podcast mentions that many learners feel blank or nervous when it's time to speak, which is often more emotional than cognitive.
Yeah.
It's like the brain understands perfectly, but the body just doesn't get the memo.
So, what strategies does the podcast suggest beyond just shadowing? Are there simple tips included?
Yes, it talks about turning your regular listening into speaking practice. One of the tips is to pause the audio and try to mimic what you've just heard, even if it's not perfect. It's really about iterative practice. Each repetition brings you a bit closer to fluency.
I can see that working, like training drills in sports. You repeat, maybe mess up a little, learn from it, and try again. But I had one thought. Could focusing too much on shadowing cause you to mimic intonation without understanding deeper context?
That's a fair challenge. I mean, if you focus excessively on mimicry, you might not develop your independent speech style. However, the podcast emphasizes that it's a bridge, a stepping stone, from passive understanding to active speaking.
Yeah.
After all, every expert was once a beginner, shadowing their way through the basics.
Right. You've got to start somewhere. And it seems like the slow, clear delivery is particularly beneficial in illustrating proper cadence and pronunciation without overwhelming learners with fast speech.
Exactly. And that pacing is key. It's almost like if you were trying to break through a thick wall of self-doubt, the slow pace gives you the space to navigate and build those speaking muscles gently. It's really an encouragement to persist, even if progress seems slow.
And I love how the approach also acknowledges the common issue of translating in your head. Instead of relying on translation, you gradually develop the reflex to think directly in English.
Yes, that direct thinking in English is what ultimately leads to fluid conversations. It's like taking a shortcut from processing to speaking. This technique can help reduce that lag between thought and speech.
Yeah.
Over time, the goal is to bypass translation entirely.
Aren't there also some tips on maintaining consistency, habits like practicing a bit every day?
Correct? The podcast gently nudges learners to practice daily. Even if it's just a short session, consistency builds neural pathways. Imagine it like watering a plant a little every day instead of flooding it once a week.
That's a really nice analogy. Slow, steady watering. What about the mental block that many learners face when speaking? The blank blank moment?
Oh yes, the dreaded block. The podcast suggests that if you ever feel your mind goes blank, just keep repeating simple phrases, or even that same line, until your body catches up. It's all about training your mouth to keep running, even if your brain is momentarily paused. And this builds a resilience that eventually makes spontaneous conversation less intimidating.
It's like a rehearsal where mistakes are just part of the process, right? And do you think this method is particularly suited for beginners, or can even advanced learners benefit?
I believe it's beneficial at all levels. Beginners get a gentle introduction, and more advanced learners might use it to polish specific aspects like intonation or nuanced phrasing. It's more about refining and reinforcing what you already know in a controlled, stress-free environment.
True, practice is practice. But I wonder if anyone might argue that speaking practice should involve more interactive methods than just shadowing. What's your take on that?
That's a good point. While shadowing is an excellent start, it's not a replacement for true conversational practice with feedback. A well-rounded approach would combine both, shadowing for building the reflex and real conversations for reactive learning and feedback.
That balance makes sense. I'm thinking of it like learning to ride a bike, training wheels first, then eventually, you have to ride without them to master the skill, right?
Exactly. It's progressive. You start comfortably, then gradually expose yourself to more complex interactions until speaking naturally becomes something you're comfortable with. And the best part is that this method acknowledges where you are now and gently pushes you forward.
I really appreciate that philosophy. It's kind, non-judgmental, and practical. It reminds me of when I first tried to speak in a new language and felt like every word was a hurdle.
Yes, and it's important to note that the podcast doesn't promise overnight miracles. Instead, it offers realistic, incremental steps that eventually lead to noticeable improvement. The emphasis is on slow, thoughtful practice, so that even if progress seems small day by day, it accumulates over time.
It definitely helps in reducing the anxiety factor. The more you practice without the pressure of perfection, the more natural it becomes. But, don't you think that sometimes learners might get stuck in the safe zone of shadowing and never branch out to real conversation?
That's a fair critique, and I think the key is to gradually transition. Shadowing should be a stepping stone, not an end goal. Once you've built confidence, it's crucial to join real conversations or even practice with language partners. It's about taking those baby steps out of your comfort zone.
And by doing so, you start to engage with the unpredictable nature of conversation, which is what really builds true fluency, right?
Exactly. The unpredictability is what makes a real dialogue dynamic and vibrant. Through consistent practice, shadowing, and actual conversations, the brain eventually learns to deal with the unexpected while switching from passive comprehension to active participation. It's a journey from understanding to thinking, and finally, to speaking without overthinking.
That's a robust takeaway, and it reminds learners that each small effort is a step toward fluency. Even those moments of stuttering or hesitation are just part of the process.
Right, and honestly, a little stutter or pause isn't a flaw. It's just a natural part of language evolution and learning. Embrace those imperfections. They're what remind us we're in the process of growth. And over time, those imperfections start to fade into a confident, clear speech.
Well said. It's like sculpting a masterpiece. Every chisel mark contributes to the final form. The path from understanding to speaking might be slow, but it's definitely rewarding.